What happens when leadership lacks consistency? When grading depends on the teacher, expectations shift from classroom to classroom, and discipline is enforced unevenly? The result? Frustration, inequity, and a school culture that feels anything but stable. Today, I'm going to be talking about why consistency in leadership matters, how small inconsistencies create a big problem, and the steps you can take to ensure fairness and clarity in your school. Because strong leadership isn't just about making the right decisions, it's about making them consistently. So join me for this conversation, because if you're in a leadership position, this is one episode you can't afford to ignore. Let's get started. Hi friend, are you ready to move into a leadership position? Do you have interests and ambitions that you want to pursue, but feel like you don't know how to take that next step? Maybe you want to start your own coaching or consulting agency. I'm Mel, and I help educators define their career path through correct mindset, knowing your options, and getting prepared for your career transition. I will show you how to level up your leadership skills, share your expertise in a new way, create impact on a larger scale, and put your leadership in motion. As an educator for over 20 years, I started to feel underused and like I had more to give. I knew when the time had come for me to leave the classroom and affect change on a larger level. Now, I'm ready to help you determine where your talents and skills mesh with your passions and interests, put your leadership in motion, and move into that next phase of your educational career journey. Let me help you define your career path by having the right mindset, knowing your options, and getting prepared for that next leadership position. So power up and put your leadership in motion. Hey guys, welcome back to the show. I'm your host, Dr. Mel. Leadership is about vision, guidance, and decision making. But above all, it's about consistency. The most effective leaders are predictable in the best way possible. Their staff, their students, and community know what to expect, and that reliability creates trust. But when leadership is inconsistent, like grading policy shifting depending on the teacher, when behavioral expectations change from one classroom to another or from one student to another, or when discipline isn't evenly enforced, the cracks begin to show. Teachers start to become frustrated. Students learn how to manipulate the system, and parents lose faith. And then suddenly, the culture of the school is at risk. So how do you ensure consistency as a leader? And why does it matter so much anyway? Well, let's break it down. There's a cost to inconsistency. Imagine that you're a student in a high school where one teacher accepts late work without penalty, but another deducts points for every day late, and then a third refuses to accept late work at all. Confusing, right? Definitely confusing for students who are trying to figure out what they're supposed to do anyway. Or picture a school where two students commit the same offense, but one receives a consequence while the other gets off with a warning. What message does that send? Inconsistent leadership breeds distrust, frustration, and resentment. It creates an unpredictable environment where the staff and the students feel like they're playing a game with the ever-changing rules. And nobody wants to have to try to figure out what they're supposed to do. Even teachers don't like that. Instead of focusing on the learning and the growth, they're focused on figuring out how to navigate those inconsistencies. I want to talk about 3 pillars of leadership consistency, or 3 things that you can do to be consistent, or 3 areas where you need to be consistent. The first one is grading. There needs to be consistency in your grading policies. Grading should be fair, transparent, and aligned across all the classrooms. When students receive drastically different grades for the same level of work, depending on the teacher, it creates inequity and frustration. Nobody really ever taught me how to collect grades or record grades when I was a teacher. I figured it out and I kind of just did whatever I wanted. I was told how many grades I needed to collect for the week and I did it, but my policy was my policy. And it really matters because students deserve clarity in how their work is assessed. Teachers also need a shared grading philosophy to ensure fairness, and parents should be able to understand their child's academic standing without confusion. They shouldn't have to ask questions. So what do you need to do to fix the inconsistency in grading? First, establish some clear grading policies in your building. If it's not established at the district level, at least make sure that your specific building is established with those clear grading policies. This ensures that all teachers are able to follow those same guidelines. And offer some professional development on effective grading practices, including standards-based grading if that's how you grade in your building or your district. Create some exemplars and then have teachers grade some different samples and see if they are consistent in their grading based on the exemplars. This is really eye-opening for teachers when they see that different teachers grade differently for the same work. And then consistently review that grading data to identify any inconsistencies and provide support where needed. Next is consistency in your expectations. Students thrive in environments where they know exactly what's expected of them, academically and behaviorally. Teachers also thrive in an environment where they know what's expected of them. If one teacher enforces participation while another allows students to disengage, it creates a fragmented learning experience for the students. And I have been in classrooms where students will go from one classroom to the other and they become different people. I recently did observations at a school. They were seeking feedback on what they needed to do to increase their scores, and student engagement was one of them. I would go into one classroom with a group of students and they were checked out, they were talking, they weren't doing their work. I would follow that group of students to another classroom with a different teacher, and it was like night and day. That teacher had different expectations, and the students rose to the challenge. They rose to the occasion and did exactly what they were supposed to do. So students will do what you expect them to do. Predictable expectations create structure and security for students. They thrive on that. Teachers need to be aligned to maintain a positive school culture as well. Students are smart and they will play one teacher against another if there isn't consistency. And consistency in expectations leads to better student outcomes. So what do you do to maintain that consistency across the classrooms? Well, develop a school-wide expectations framework that all of your teachers are committed to upholding. And then provide your teachers with those tools and those strategies to reinforce those expectations consistently. You have to give the expectations to your teachers too. They need to know what the expectations are so they can be consistent. And then model the expectations yourself. Leadership sets the tone. If administrators don't follow through, neither will the staff. And the last area where you need to be consistent is discipline. Few things damage school culture more than inconsistent discipline. If students see that some peers receive harsher consequences than others for the same behavior, it erodes that respect for the system and for the leaders who are trying to enforce it. Inconsistency in discipline creates inequity, especially among the marginalized student groups. Teachers also become frustrated when they don't feel supported in behavior management. And a lack of clear discipline practices leads to increased disruption in learning. I've seen classrooms where students get in trouble and teachers send them out. If that happens, the student is not learning. I've seen a lot of discipline where students either end up in ISS or they end up in out of school suspension. If students are not in class, they are not learning. As the building leader, you need to be visible and you need to make sure that everything that's happening in your building is consistent with the discipline. If you have assistant principals or culture leaders, make sure that they understand what the expectation is, because you don't want one culture leader handing out one type of discipline for one thing and somebody else doing something different. So how do you fix it? You create and enforce a clear discipline matrix that outlines consequences for specific behaviors. And then make sure to train your staff on any implicit biases that they might have to ensure that discipline is fair and equitable. And then hold students accountable while also providing those restorative approaches to help them learn from their mistakes rather than just receiving punishment or punitive measures. So how do you as a school leader ensure that grading, that your expectations within the building and discipline are applied consistently across your school? First, set clear policies and procedures. Make sure your school has well-documented policies that define grading, behavioral expectations, and disciplinary responses. Ensure they are widely communicated and understood by everyone, students, staff, parents. Number 2, provide professional development. Don't just assume that everyone's on the same page. Everybody has a different mental model. I know my mental model is different than someone else's who has either been in leadership longer or maybe not as long. So train your staff regularly on the best practices for grading, for classroom management, and equitable discipline. Then number 3, lead by example. As administrators and instructional leaders, you must model the consistency that you expect from your staff. If teachers see leaders bending the rules or making exceptions, they're going to follow suit. And I apologize for stammering over my words. I'm still a little bit sick and I've got drainage. And so it's all the things that I cannot seem to speak clearly today. Number 4, create systems for accountability. Have regular check-ins, analyze the data, and listen to feedback. If you notice some inconsistencies, address them promptly. Number 5, involve your stakeholders. Parents, students, and teachers should have a voice in shaping and refining those policies. When people feel heard, they're more likely to buy into those systems, and you're going to have a much better culture. Predictability in leadership isn't boring. It's essential. When staff and students know where they can trust the systems that are in place, they feel safe, they feel empowered, and they feel supported. Inconsistency, on the other hand, it's going to weaken that credibility. And it leaves people second guessing the system, questioning your leadership, and ultimately, they're going to disengage from the school's mission. As a leader, your challenge isn't just to make the right decisions. It's to make them consistently. Because when you do, you create an environment where everybody can thrive. So your action step is to strengthen your leadership consistency. Evaluate your school's grading, the expectations, and the discipline policies. Where are there some inconsistencies that you can address? Then schedule a leadership team meeting to discuss ways to improve the alignment. And last but not least is to share this episode with your staff to start a conversation about that consistency. If this episode sparked something for you, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with a colleague or a friend stepping into leadership. They need this just as much as you do. And if you're ready for even more tools and support, visit our Empowered Educator Network. The link is in the show notes. There are free resources, there's a community, and we're here to help you lead with purpose. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep leading with heart.